So we are going to read our book for language arts, which we've read already. The true story of the three little pigs. We've read it quite a while ago when we were working on our opinion papers. But it's also part of our language arts. All right, I need everyone to sit down. And we are not getting anything out right now. We're not getting papers out. I told you I'm going to read. Everything else should be off the desk. You can have your language arts folder out if you would like, but that is it. I need everyone star. I need tracking. I need sitting. I need paying attention. Thank you. So, the true story of the three little pigs. Everybody knows the story of the three little pigs, or at least they think they do. But I'll let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows the real story because nobody has ever heard my side of the story. I'm the wolf, Alexander T. Wolf. You can call me Al. I don't know how this whole big bad wolf thing got started, but it's all wrong. Maybe because of our diet. Hey, it's not my fault. Wolves eat cute little animals, sorry, Cole, like bunnies and sheep and pigs. That's just the way we are. If cheeseburgers were cute, folks would probably think you were big and bad too. So in the hamburger, we have bunny ears, a mouse tail, we got some feet, some noses. Ew. It's kind of gross.
I'd rather have a normal cheeseburger. Yeah.
It's a cheeseburger with extra.
With extra gross.
All right. Grayson, please put it down. All right. But, like I was saying, the whole big bad wolf thing is all wrong. The real story is about a sneeze and a cup of sugar. This is the real story. All right, before we continue, Sam, read me this sentence.
I was just about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dinner for my dear old granny's birthday cake.
All right, what are you going to do when you hear that? Then I know you are paying attention. Way back in the once upon a time, I was making a birthday cake for my dear old granny. I had a terrible sneezing cold. I ran out of sugar. Uh-oh. Can't make cake without sugar. So I walked down the street to ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Now, this neighbor was a pig, and he wasn't too bright either. He had built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind would build a house of straw? So, of course, the minute I knocked on the door, it fell right in. I didn't want to just walk into somebody else's house, so I called, "Little pig, little pig, are you in?" No answer. I was just about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. That's when my nose started to itch. I felt a sneeze coming on. Well, I huffed and I snuffed. And I sneezed a great sneeze. Uh-oh. Ruh-roh, there goes the house. And you know what? that whole darn straw house fell down, and right in the middle of the pile of straw was the first little pig, dead as a doornail. He had been home the whole time. It seemed a shame to leave a perfectly good ham dinner lying there in the straw. So I ate it up. Think of it as a big cheeseburger just laying there. I was feeling a little better, but I still didn't have my cup of sugar. So I went to the next neighbor's house. The neighbor was the first little pig's brother. He was a little smarter, but not much. He had built his house of sticks. I rang the bell on the stick house. Nobody answered. I called, "Mr. Pig, Mr. Pig, are you in?" He yelled, "Go away, Wolf, you can't come in. I'm shaving the hairs of my chinny chin chin." Oh, dear. I had just grabbed the doorknob when I felt another sneeze coming on. I huffed and I snuffed and I tried to cover my mouth, but I sneezed a great sneeze. And you're not going to believe it, but this guy's house fell down just like his brother's. When the dust cleared, there was a second little pig, dead as a doornail. Wolf's honor.
You gonna eat it? Yeah.
Now you know food will spoil if you just leave it out in the open, so I did the only thing there was to do. I had dinner again. Think of it as a second helping. I was getting awfully full, but my cold was feeling a little better. And I still didn't have that cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. So I went to the next house. This guy was the first and second little pig's brother. He must have been the brains of the family. He had built his house of bricks. I knocked on the brick house. No answer. I called, "Mr. Pig, Mr. Pig, are you in?" And do you know what that rude little pig answered? "Get out of here, Wolf. Don't bother me again." Okay. What is going to happen?
Nothing's in the house.
Talk about impolite. He probably had a whole sack full of sugar, and he wouldn't give me even one little cup for my dear sweet old granny's birthday cake. What a pig! I was just about to go home and maybe make a nice birthday card instead of a cake when I felt my cold coming on. I huffed and I snuffed and I sneezed once again. Then the third little pig yelled, "And your old granny can sit on a pin." Well, how did he know he wanted sugar for his granny's birthday cake? Now, I'm usually a pretty calm fellow, but when somebody talks about my granny like that, I go a little crazy. When the cops drove up, of course, I was trying to break down this pig's door, and the whole time I was huffing and puffing and sneezing and making a real scene. Oh dear. But is the house falling? The rest, as they say, is history. The news reporters found out about the 2 pigs I had for dinner. They figured a sick guy going to borrow a cup of sugar didn't sound very exciting, so they jazzed up the story with all of that huff and puff and blow your house down, and they made me the big bad wolf. That's it, the real story. I was framed. But maybe you could loan me a cup of sugar. A cup of sugar. So, what do you think? Whose story is real, the pigs or the wolves?
Wolves.
think so, huh? I don't know. Maybe they're both a little right. All right, so let's take out your sentence. If you need to glue it on yet to the piece of paper, let's do so now. Yes, Jeremiah.
I have a book that's the Three Little Pigs too.
You have the book too? Kind of silly. Yes, Helen.
I have a book. It's like this little pig, but ninja.
But ninja. Ooh, so you should bring that in. The ninja one. Because it's fun to try. Does anybody else have a different version of the Three Little Pigs? Different than the pig in the original one?
It's kind of the original, but the pig's kind of.
All right, bring that in. It's kind of fun to read different stories of the same story we read, or different versions. Yes. Emma, or M. Yes. The three big sneezes. That's true. That could be a different part of the story, or a different version. All right. So, let me get the sentence out. What do you notice? Anything different about the story, or what do you notice about the story? I can find it. Here we go. That's not what I wanted. I was just about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. It's a pretty... Is it a simple sentence or a complex or compound sentence? Tessa. Would you say? Simple. It is a simple sentence. There is no conjunctions joining two clauses. It is a simple sentence. So that it's a very pretty easy sentence. There's not a lot of difficulty to it. So it should be easy to break down and label tomorrow. So any questions about the sentence, any comments, anything else you would like to say about it? All right, so has anyone ever heard the story of Flora and Ulysses? All right, so I am going to start reading this. It's a longer story. Doesn't have that many pictures. And it has, what is this? It has an award to it, with it, or on it. Who could tell me what this is? Does anybody know what this is? Owen.
It's like a book winning award for being like a book.
Yes. This is a gold, which means it is the highest honor. Yes, Grayson.
I have a different version, but I don't have it. My old school at the library had it.
Oh, okay.
I think the Three Little Wolves and the
Oh, you're talking about the three.
pig.
Oh.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, I've never seen that.
I saw that.
Do you have anybody has it? Bring it in. Can't get into the library. Yes. Oh, I've got another one. So friends, we've got to keep track of this stuff. But now this book is being made into a movie that's going to be on Disney Plus. That's what it says on this book. Flora and Ulysses. So, oh, you bet. So while I am reading this, you can continue to glue your, so Flora and Ulysses. We're going to find out who these characters are. This is by the author Kate DiCarmela, and she has written a lot of, let's see, Because of Winn-Dixie, The Tale of Despereaux, The Miracle Journey of Edward Tulane. a lot of very famous books. So it starts off as a comic strip. Can you all see it? Yes, Emma.
I have the book because of my
Yeah, that's a popular one. So in the Tickham kitchen, late on a summer afternoon, oh my goodness, he's got some large object. He goes, ahem. So I'm just going to read this. It's all kind of fine print. But happy birthday to you. That's what he's saying. It's her birthday. What's this, Donald? This is your birthday present. It is a Ulysses Super Suction Multi-Terrain 2000X. Happy birthday. It's a vacuum cleaner. It's a Ulysses 2000X. Yep. It's the crown jewel of vacuums. It features an extra long cord so that absolutely no mess, no dirt is ever out of your reach. It's indoor and outdoor. It goes everywhere. It does everything. Goody. You have to try it out. Turn it on. For heaven's sake, Donald, please. So he turns it on, and it starts chasing him. Whoa, hey now, it sucked up his pants. Whoops. And now it is just going crazy around the house. What in the world, Donald? It's multi-terrain. You should try it outside. And look at it, it's taking her outside. And that's how it all began, with a vacuum cleaner. Really. Chapter 1, A Natural-Born Cynic. Flora Bell Buckman was in her room at her desk. She was very busy. She was doing two things at once. She was ignoring her mother, and she was also reading a comic book entitled The Illuminated Adventures of the Amazing Incandesto. Flora, her mother shouted, what are you doing up there? I'm reading, Flora shouted back. Remember the contract, her mother shouted. Do not forget the contract. What is a contract? Owen.
To sign up for a job.
Well, you can sign up for a job, a contract. Yep. It can be that. It could be something else. I don't think she's signing up for a job, but that is correct. Owen, what else can it be? Cole.
It could be like you sign it and then you have to do what it says.
Yes. So if it's an agreement that both parties sign, and then you have to agree to keeping your end of the bargain. At the beginning of summer, in a moment of weakness, Flora had made the mistake of signing a contract that said she would work to turn her face away from the idiotic hijinks of comics and towards the bright light of true literature. Those were the exact words of the contract. They were her mother's words. Flora's mother was a writer. And she wrote romance novels. Talk about hijinks. Flora hated romance novels. In fact, she hated romance. I hate romance, said Flora out loud to herself. She liked to say the words, like the way the words sounded. She imagined them floating above her in the comic strip bubble. It was a comforting thing to have words, I hate romance, hanging over her head, especially negative words about romance. Does anybody know what romance is? What is she talking about? She's talking about kissing. Your favorite topic. Oh, you guys are too easy. All right. She was a natural-born cynic who lived in defiance of contracts. What is defiance? If you are defiant, what does that mean? It means you are going to rebel against it. You're not going to do it. That's what defiance is. Yep, thought Flora, that's me. She bent her head and went back to reading about the amazing Incandesto. She was interrupted a few minutes later by a very loud noise. It sounded as if a jet plane had landed in the Tickhams' backyard. What in the world, said Flora. She got up from her desk and looked out the window and saw Mrs. Tickham running around the backyard with a shiny, oversized vacuum cleaner. It looked like she was vacuuming the yard. That can't be, thought Flora. Who vacuums their yard? Actually, it didn't look like Mrs. Tickham knew what she was doing. It was more like the vacuum cleaner was in charge, and the vacuum cleaner seemed to be out of its mind, or its engine, or something. A few volts shy of a load, said Flora out loud. And then she saw that Mrs. Tickham and the vacuum cleaner were headed directly for a squirrel. Hey now, said Flora. She banged on the window. Watch out, she shouted. You're going to vacuum up that squirrel. She said the words, and then she had a strange moment of seeing them hanging there over her head. You're going to vacuum up that squirrel. There is just no predicting what kind of sentence you might say, thought Flora. For instance, who would ever think you would shout, you're going to vacuum up that squirrel? Didn't make any difference, though, what the words she said. Flora was far too away. The vacuum cleaner was too loud, and also clearly it was bent on destruction. The Maleficence must be stopped, said Flora in a deep, superhero voice. This Maleficence must be stopped, was what the unassuming janitor Alfred T. Slipper always said before he was transformed into the amazing Incandesto and becoming a towering, crime-fighting pillar of light. Unfortunately, Albert T. Slipper wasn't present. Oh, dear. Can you guys see the picture? There's a little squirrel being chased by a vacuum cleaner.
Whoa.
Poor squirrel.
What?
Squirrel.
It's a vacuum cleaner. It's a vacuum cleaner. Yeah, I can't. What? Oh, I see.
Where was Incandesto when you needed him? Not that Flora really believed in superheroes, but still. She stood at the window and watched as the squirrel was vacuumed up. Poof! Thump! Holy smokes, said Flora. Chapter 2, The Mind of a Squirrel. We can finish a little bit more and then these are really short chapters. Not much goes on in the mind of a squirrel. Huge portions of what is loosely termed the squirrel brain are given over to one thought: food. The average squirrel cognition goes something like this: I wonder what there is to eat. This thought is then repeated with small variations. Where's the food? Man, I sure am hungry. Is that a piece of food? And are there more pieces of food? Some 600 or 700 times a day. All of this is to say that when the squirrel in the Tickham's backyard got swallowed up by the Ulysses 2000X, there weren't a lot of terribly profound thoughts going through his head. As the vacuum cleaner roared towards him, he did not, for instance, think, here at last is my fate. Is my fate come to meet me? He did not think, oh, please give me one more chance and I will be good. What he thought was, man, I sure am hungry. Sounds like Emma.
Emma the squirrel.
And then there was a terrible roar, and he was sucked right off his feet. At that point, there were no thoughts in his squirrel head, not even thoughts of food. Chapter 3, The Death of a Squirrel. Seemingly, swallowing a squirrel was a bit much even for the powerful indoor-outdoor Ulysses 2000X. Mrs. Tickham's birthday machine let out an uncertain roar and stuttered to a stop. Mrs. Tickham bent over and looked down at the vacuum cleaner. There was a tail sticking out of it. For heaven's sakes, said Mrs. Tickham, what's next? She dropped to her knees and gave the tail a tentative tug. She stood. She looked around the yard. Help, she said. I think I've killed a squirrel.
What?
Chapter 4, A Surprisingly Helpful Cynic. Flora ran from her room. She ran down the stairs. As she ran, she thought, for a cynic, I am a surprisingly helpful person. She went out the back door. Her mother called to her. She said, where are you going, Flora Belle? Flora didn't answer her. She never answered her mother when she called her Flora Belle. That middle name, you know you're in trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Flora ran through the tall grass and cleared the fence between her yard and the Tickums in a single bound. Move out of my way, said Flora. She gave Mrs. Tickum a shove and grabbed hold of the vacuum cleaner. It was heavy. She picked it up and shook it. Nothing happened. She shook harder. Shh. The squirrel dropped out of the vacuum cleaner and landed with a plop on the grass. He didn't look that great. He was missing a lot of fur. Vacuumed off, Flora assumed. His eyes fluttered. His chest rose and fell and rose and fell. And then it stopped moving altogether. Flora knelt. She put a finger on the squirrel's chest. At the back of each issue of the Illuminated Adventures of the Amazing Incandesto, there was a series of bonus comics. One was Flora's very favorite bonus comic, entitled Terrible Things Can Happen to You. As a cynic, Flora found it wise to be prepared. Who knew what horrible, unpredictable thing would happen next? Terrible things can happen to you detailed what actions to take if you inadvertently consumed plastic fruit. This happened more often than you would suppose. Some plastic fruit was extremely realistic looking. How to perform the Heimlich maneuver on your elderly Aunt Edith if she choked on a stringy piece of steak. What to do if you are wearing a striped shirt and a swarm of locusts descended. Run, locusts eat stripes. And of course, how to administer everyone's favorite life-saving technique, CPR. Terrible Things Can Happen to You did not, however, detail exactly how someone was supposed to give CPR to a squirrel. I'll figure it out, said Flora. What will you figure out, said Mrs. Tickum. Flora didn't answer her. Instead, she bent down and put her mouth on the squirrel's mouth. It tasted funny. If she were forced to describe it, she would say it tasted exactly like squirrel. Fuzzy, damp, slightly nutty. Have you lost your mind? Said Mrs. Tickum. Flora ignored her. She breathed into the squirrel's mouth. She pushed down on his small chest. She started to count. Okay, so one more. The Squirrel Obliges, Chapter 5. Something strange had happened to the squirrel's brain. Things had gone black. And then into this blackness, there came a light so beautiful, so bright, that the squirrel had to run away. A voice spoke to him. What's that? Said the squirrel. The light shone brighter. The voice spoke again. Okay, said the squirrel, you bet. He wasn't sure what exactly he was agreeing to, but it didn't matter. He was just so happy. He was floating in a great lake of light, and the voice was singing to him. Oh, it was wonderful. It was the best thing ever. And then there was a loud noise. The squirrel heard another voice. This voice was counting. The light receded. Breathe, the new voice shouted. The squirrel obliged. He took a deep, shuddering breath, and then another, and another. The squirrel returned. Oh. Chapter 6, in the event of a seizure. Well, he's breathing, said Mrs. Tickum. Yes, said Flora, he is. She felt a swell of pride. The squirrel rolled over onto his stomach. He raised his head. His eyes were glazed. For heaven's sake, said Mrs. Tickum, look at him. She chuckled quietly. She shook her head, and then she laughed out loud. She kept laughing. She laughed and laughed and laughed. She laughed so hard that she started to shake. Was she having some kind of fit? Flora tried to remember that terrible things can happen to you, advised in the event of a seizure. It has something to do with moving the tongue out of the way or stabilizing it with a stick or something. Flora had saved the squirrel's life, but she didn't see any reason she couldn't save Mrs. Tickum's tongue. The sun sank a little lower in the sky. Mrs. Tickum continued to laugh hysterically. And Flora Bell Buckham started looking around the Tickham's backyard for a stick. I don't know if she needs a stick. All right, so this is the beginning of Flora and Ulysses. We do know that since he's on the front cover that he survives. So we're going to find out what this is all about. I think it's going to be fun. Yeah.
Look a squirrel. I thought he kissed the squirrel. It was a mouse.
Mouth to mouth, CPR.
Yeah, I thought he kissed the squirrel.
That concludes